Phew. Thank you. But I really should be blessing you because I just infected all of you with my germs. That's right, I just sent out my ambassadors of sickness, spreading news of great sore throats and runny noses. You're welcome. Happy to do it, brother. Even if I put out my hand to try to stop the germs from going forth, different little germs will find their way through my fingers like star fleets through the Emperor's fingers, if you watch Star Wars. Others will lay on my palm, and then when I go and I turn a doorknob, where do those germs go? Onto the doorknob, just waiting for the next moment to spread their not good to cheer to the next person that touches that doorknob. In fact, germs can spread so quick that in 2 to 4 hours, no matter what the size of the building, they can spread to every single person in that building. And we are constantly spreading germs. So much so that some people decide that they're going to stay indoors all the time, or had hand sanitizer out with them everywhere they go because they want to, or they won't even shake hands with people. By the way, if you're one of those germ-conscious people, first of all, I apologize to today's message because I'm going to fear you, make you afraid a lot. Fear you, I don't know the, fear you! All right, I'm going to make you afraid today, talking about germs. But the other thing that I'll say is this: you spread more germs in a handshake than you do a hug. So if you're just trying to have the most reward with the least amount of risk for your social interaction behavior, maybe that's why brothers can't shake hands, brothers gotta hug. All right? So that's why we hug at this church. We're spreading less germs. But it's hard to try to go throughout your day without getting sick if the bug is going around. It's impossible. And you can try your whole life to try to not get sick and do so many things to take these rules and regulations to try to help you to not get sick, but chances are you're still going to get sick every now and then. Now, I'm not against hand sanitizer, and I think it's fine. People want to have a lot of ways that they do things to make sure that they don't get sick. That's fine. Lily's got her hand sanitizer right here. She's like, yep. Looks like you need some. That's great. But what's interesting is for a community to spread sickness, they have to be close enough to each other to be able to spread that sickness in a relatively quick amount of time. Now, one of the things that I find fascinating about germs is that the germ has to be just quick enough that it's able to be spread to other people, but not too quick. Because if it's too quick, then I'll get too sick too fast, and what do I do if I get too sick? Go home. And if I go home, what doesn't happen to that germ? Doesn't get to spread. It kills the germ. And if you have like a community that's so tight-knit and never goes out to anywhere else, like the Amish community, say, for instance, sickness would spread very quickly among them. Then that would be it. It would die, and that's it, because it doesn't spread into the other community. So you need a community. This is, by the way, a how-to spread the sickness, okay? That's what this message is about. How to spread sickness 101. What did your pastor talk to you about? Well, my pastor told me how to get other people sick. Oh, great. All right. So this is what you need. You need a group of people that do enough life with each other, come in contact with each other, that thing can get started. But then you also need people that go out. And they go out in the community and they spread the sickness everywhere they go. Now, the reality is, usually sicknesses die pretty quick. And it's not a huge epidemic like we see in the movies. Have you seen a movie or a TV show where there's maybe a zombie infection thing that's going around and it quickly spreads everywhere? Most of those don't actually make sense because the zombie, this is just my nerd talking, this is my inner nerd right here for the moment, but they get infected too quick. They wouldn't be able to spread it fast enough to infect other people that it would just die there. People would see, oh, you're infected, they isolate, and then they would be able to get it. But you ever watch the movie where they face off the infection and then the last scene in the movie is like someone in the airplane, and then you're like, oh, no, they're going to go and infect everyone there. We've got a sequel on our hands, it sounds like. Well, if anyone ever asked you the question of what is the predictable benefit of the Christian worldview, and I know that you get this question a lot. You're at the grocery store and someone comes up to you and says, yeah, but what is the predictable benefit of the Christian worldview model, right? You've all had this happen to you all the time, right? Well, now you'll have an answer. Because there is a lot of predictable benefits of the Christian worldview model. And by the way, what that means in layman's terms is, what's the benefit of living a Christian life? Really, essentially, that's what it's saying, that you get simply because of that perspective. Well, one of them is historically proven, and it's protection by following the rules. Specifically, before germ theory was discovered. See, before we could discover these germs, we didn't really know what spread diseases and what spread sickness or what didn't. We didn't understand germs, yet for thousands of years, there was this group of people that had this weird tradition of ritual cleaning when they came in contact with unclean things. Anyone know what this group of people might have been? The Jewish people, right? Thank God for the Jewish people. They gave us Jesus and matzah. Awesome. Okay, so they knew just by following what God said that they should wash their hands before they eat is one of the examples of the things that they did. They also did this weird thing that if they had to go to the bathroom, they would go outside the camp and they would bury it. Really bizarre, right? Now, what's interesting about that is they didn't even realize the hygienic benefits of it. For them, it was a spiritual practice. And this ritual cleaning that they would do with water eventually later was transformed into what we call baptism. So baptism actually comes from this, and it was just one of many ritual cleanings. And we don't think when we wash our hands before we eat. We do wash our hands before we eat, right? Okay, we don't think when we wash our hands before we eat that we're doing anything spiritual. We just think we're being smart. But for thousands of years, the Jewish people were protected. Now, I don't know if you guys follow me on Facebook or anything like that, but I don't know if I'll keep doing it, but I've been doing these minute gospel things where I take the gospel of the day, and I just do like a minute sharing on it, and I've done this for 2 days, and probably that'll be it. Who knows? This is the way I go, okay? But yesterday's gospel reading was on how Jesus doesn't wash his hands, and then he starts eating, and neither does his disciples. And the Jewish people, the Pharisees, the religious people of the day, they come up to Jesus and they go, hey, what are you doing? You're not following the law. Now, I don't know if any of you have had debates with God where you told him about what he's doing wrong and should be doing different. Anybody? No? Just me? Okay. But this is a little bit like that. Not a smart thing to debate Jesus about following the Bible. But that's what they did, and Jesus doesn't take any crap. He goes right back at them, and he calls them blind guides. He doesn't go easy on them. He says this weird stuff about honoring your father, which I don't know who would want to do that. Hey, Dad. Anyway, he also talks about how it's not that goes in a man that defiles him, but what comes out of him. And the point is that there's this huge doctrine of beliefs that people have that it's these outside influences that are making you bad. If you're messed up and you make mistakes, just blame your mom for it. That's what all of us do. Right, Mom? Anyway, it's not your fault. It's somebody else's fault. It's the world's fault. It's all these influences, these negative things. You're great. You're perfect. You're just this perfect little child that unfortunately has been corrupted by the world. Right? That's the idea. And if that's true, then what we need to do is protect ourselves. We need to isolate ourselves from all of the world, and then we can achieve true holiness by going up on a mountain with a billy goat and just spending all our time there, and then we'll achieve enlightenment. Does this sound familiar? Does anyone hear these kind of ideas, these kind of principles? At one point, someone came up to me and they asked me if I believed you could be a Buddhist and a Christian at the same time. And I knew what they were getting at. They were getting at the point that a Buddhist is actually supposed to be a philosophy. Buddhism is supposed to be a philosophy, not a religion. And so the question is, could they follow that philosophy and follow Christianity together? And while I do understand that Buddhism can be a philosophy, not a religion, I still had to say no. And the reason is because Christian is also a philosophy. And what I mean by that is, Christianity, the approach, the method in which God is calling us to live our lives as Christians, is drastically and I would say oppositely opposed as the Buddhist mentality. And let me explain what I mean by that. Both have the goal of achieving balance in your life. The Buddhist has this method of achieving balance. It's to cut yourself off from all great sorrows and great joys. The Christian philosophy is the opposite. Imagine, if you will, that there is a balance beam right before me. And I wanted to walk across this balance beam, but I have got a problem. I'm not good at balancing because I'm a guy. Right? So I want to balance and walk across this. Now I have two options. Really, there are more options, but bear with me. Pretend that there are two. I could chop my right arm off, because that's clearly weighing me down this way. And I could chop my left arm off, and then I could walk across the beam, centered. Or I could stretch out my right hand, and I could stretch out my left hand, and then I could walk across the beam balanced. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever walked across a balance beam or seen someone do it, but they typically don't walk across like this. Why? Because the counterweight of reaching out your right arm and reaching out your left arm actually achieves better balance than if you didn't have arms at all. And the point is that while it can be very tempting at times to cut our emotions off, to isolate ourselves away, because the pain of that moment is so difficult that we don't want to deal with it, true love, true life, true enlightenment, and true wisdom doesn't come out from isolating yourself away from society and the dangerous influences that it has. True wisdom comes from reaching out your right hand and reaching out your left hand and embracing both. Taking the greatest difficulties, the greatest sorrows, the greatest tragedies, and the greatest pain that you might feel in that given moment, and also the greatest joys, the greatest happiness, the greatest pleasures in life. That is the Christian life. That is the life that Jesus calls us to. It's the life of the mountain and the life of the valley. And essentially what Jesus is sharing in that reading that was yesterday is that it's not these outside influences that are making us sick. It's actually something in here. See, if we spent all day eating donuts and candy and burgers and French fries, would we feel very well in here? Probably not. But if we never ate anything again, how good would we feel in here? Worse, because we wouldn't feel anything at all. We'd be dead. Now, I'm all about fasting. I think fasting is great, and I fast every once in a while. I fast pretty frequently. It's a great practice, but it has to be momentary. And even in prison, even in the worst place with the worst people, time out is a punishment. Now, that might seem counterintuitive to you, because if I think I had to hang out with murderers all day long, I would think a timeout might be great. But still there, isolation is more painful than even dealing with murderers all day long. And even eating junk like donuts and hamburgers and French fries, and granted, we all probably eat too much of that, but even doing that is better than eating nothing. We need each other. We need outside influences to be able to correct what's in here. And that's what Jesus is pointing us to. Now, in the reading that we just listened to, my dad read, he was talking about Jesus having this person come who's mourning. And they came with the body of their son. And if you ask that mother in that moment, by the way, the mother was a widow, but this wasn't her husband's funeral. This was her only son's funeral. Which meant in that culture, she not only was in the pain of losing both her husband and her son, she also had no way to make any income. because there wasn't equal wages, unfortunately, in that time. Okay? So she was devastated and mourning. And in that moment, if you asked her whether she would pay the price of cutting herself off from all joys to not having to experience that sorrow in that moment, she probably would say yes. She'd probably say, it's not worth it. That joy that I experience is not worth the pain of this moment. And I will say that sometimes numbness is a gift. Sometimes there's things that happen that are so bad we need time to be able to deal with them. And there can be time that even avoidance can be a gift. Like the fatty food, we fall on it too much, but it can be good for the moment. But eventually we need to reach out our right hand and we need to reach out our left hand and experience this moment, experience even the pain for that place. Now, in Jewish culture, if you touched a dead body, you became unclean. Makes sense, right? Because dead bodies might have become dead for a reason. Maybe it was some disease and you could catch that. So they were very careful about not touching dead bodies. And if you touched a dead body, you became unclean. There's a book called The Road to Character, and it's a really good book. I'm loving it. One of the things the guy talks about is how in life we spend most of our life building up one of two lists. One of those lists is what we call the resume list. Now, who here has put together a resume before? And who here, keep your hands up if you've done a resume before, who here has exaggerated something on that resume to make themselves sound better? Keep your hands up. Because it's pretty much all of us, right? That's what a resume list is. We want to look at these achievements that we've done in our lives of all these things. What school you went to. Maybe you went to a fancy school like Harvard or Yale or Indian River State College, right? And you make that sound really good and fancy, and then you talk about all the things like I was an executive assistant. Actually, I was a secretary, right? Whatever. But you make them sound really impressive because it's about self-boasting so you can self-achieve. And that's what the resume list is all about. But if your resume list is all that you have, at the end of your life when it's time for the second list, which he calls the eulogy list, if your resume list is the biggest thing that someone can share at your funeral, you didn't live a very good life. If at the end of your life the person says, well, he did go to a good college. He's a bit of a jerk, but he did go to a good college. Did you live a good life? No. So I was thinking about the eulogy list, and I was thinking about people that have made a difference in my life and that have passed on. One of them is a guy named Byron. Byron was my youth minister when I was a kid. And they had the sermon for his funeral online. So I watched it. And it was awesome because even if you never met Byron, you get a sense of who Byron was. One of the things that Byron shared, or they shared about Byron in this sermon, it basically boiled down to this. Byron lived loud with laughter. Byron lived loud with laughter. And Byron influenced everyone that met him for the good. He was such a positive guy and joyous guy. And he was one of those guys, he would give messages and he would just be really intense and he'd be, kind of yelling, but it never seemed angry. It just seemed like he was passionate. And eventually, his voice, that was the end of the sermon, right, when this happened. Because he kept talking until this, and then that was the end of the sermon, right? But that was Byron. And one of the things, it sounds like Bernie. He was a little less begrudging, but, similarly. Now, Byron's resume would be, I don't know what college he went to, and then youth minister. He was a youth minister till he died. So his youth ministry, his whole life, we call them the white elephant of youth ministry because they just don't exist, right? Guys like that. They're just in youth ministry their whole lives. But if you look at his eulogy list, if you look at the things that he did and the people that he built up and the people that he influenced, that list is incredibly long. That list really matters. That list made a difference in my life. And then because of Byron's influence, have made a difference in other people's lives. See, that's the influence, the infection that really matters. Now let's go back to this young boy who's laying on this, what's called a bier. Now, this is not the kind that you're drinking when you're mourning. This is the kind that you lay on, a bier, right? So what it's like a, what's that thing that you carry bodies with? Stretcher. It's like a stretcher, but it's wooden. And they would lay the body on it. Now, when Jesus went and touched this body, did Jesus become unclean? No. Did the death infect Jesus and make him dead? No. What happened to the boy instead? The life infected him. Jesus' life infected that boy with life, and he went again. He lived again. He sat up and was alive again. Now here I understand, yes, on our own strength, we do not have that power. But we do have a power. See, flus, colds, all these bugs are not the only thing that's contagious. You know what else is contagious? Love. What else is contagious? Laughter. Have you ever heard someone... Hey, don't jump ahead, all right? I'm going to get to you in a second, Dad. Have you ever heard a laugh that was so hilarious that you didn't even know why he was laughing, but it just made you start to laugh? Obviously you have. Every once in a while, I'll get a joke that'll just bomb. Yes, even me. I'll give a joke at this, and nobody will laugh except for one person. That man in the back with the bald head that jumps around all the time, known as my father, he will start laughing, and it'll be this deep belly, loud, and then everyone will start laughing. They're not laughing at me, they're laughing at his laughter. Because his laughter is infectious, it's contagious, it spreads. See, I believe that it's not just hate that is infectious and contagious, love. And I actually believe love is more infectious. And I think that it's not just anger and bitterness that is infectious. I think forgiveness is infectious too. Have you ever noticed that when you have an argument with someone and you're at each other's throat and then you start apologizing for what you do wrong, there's this almost automatic response that they start apologizing for what they did wrong? Not every time, but a lot of the time. Tully's like, nope, no, you're not the people I hang out with. A lot of the time they do, right? Okay? Not all the time, but forgiveness is infectious. And more infectious than tears. See, tears can be infectious, and I'm one of those people. If I started crying now, maybe a few of you would start crying too. I'm not planning on, but there's an infectious element of that. But you know what's more infectious is laughter. If one of you starts laughing, the other one will start laughing. Have any of you seen that, where you just start laughing for like the longest time, and you just don't even know how, it feels like you've been laughing forever. Because laughter and joy is infectious. Now, if you ask that mother, when her son sat up, when he was alive again, how she felt about isolation, how she felt about protecting herself from the risk of emotional attachment at that moment when her son got up, what do you think she would say? I don't know if she'd have any words. It would be tears and laughter, because she would be so overjoyed. No pain that I experienced before even compares to the joy of this moment. And all of us have that promise. Through new life, death, where is your sting? Where is your victory? Because life and life anew through Jesus Christ is promised to all of us. So I want to leave us with a few questions today that I want us to think about. One of them is, are you spending more time on your resume list or your eulogy list? Are you spending more time building up your self-achievement, or are you focusing on the relationships that really matter in your life and making a difference of the people around you? Because that's what really matters. The other thing is, how are you infecting people? I want you to think about that as you go throughout the week. How am I infecting people? Because they found something really fascinating about being kind to people. it makes a difference. In fact, there's a 3-level factor in kindness. What that means is if you're kind to all of your friends, that influence of kindness makes them more likely to be kind to their friends. And that then has a factor on their friends that they're more likely to be kind to their friends. 3 people deep, they are kinder because they had someone be kind to them. How are you infecting people? Are you infecting people with your complaints, with your negativity, with your criticism? Or are you infecting people with your laughter, with your joy, with your sorrow? Now, I know some of you are struggling, so maybe that's too challenging right now at this moment because you're sick. And that's why I want to leave us with third thought. When you're struggling, are you isolating? Are you pulling yourself away where you can't get that love and that infectious joy? Where you're all alone with that struggle? Or are you going deeper in to a community that will lift you up? Because here's the thing, we here don't just preach that you should be there for other people in their sickness. We'd follow it too. So if you're struggling, we don't care what you're struggling with. We care that you're struggling, but we don't care what you're struggling with. We want to know, and we want to help, and we want to walk through that sickness with you. Even if we get a little sick ourselves, you're not a burden to us. You're our brother. You're our sister. We want you to be part of our community so much because that's what health is really all about. Because we don't believe that the negative influences of the outside are what get us really sick. We think it's loneliness. And we don't think that any of us have to struggle alone. So if you're right now sick, cough on me, sneeze on me. I'll take it because I want us to get well together. And I need people to lean on as well. So none of us have to do this alone as a community. We can go out. But remember the last thing, it's not by my strength, not by yours, but by God's joy, God's strength, God's love that always is there, always succeeds, and is always with us, that we really get better. That He produces new life and life abundantly. And when Jesus prayed over that kid and he was alive again, what did people do? See, they celebrated, but then what did they do? They went out and they spread their infection. They spread their infection of the good news that God is real and that He saves us. So let us be infectious people as well. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I thank You that You have never abandoned or forsaken us in our dysfunction, in our sickness, in our time of need, that You are always there for us. Lord, give us the courage to share our difficulties, our struggles, to be sick together, and thank You that You have sent us people to nurse us to better health. Lord, help us to not isolate, but to embrace the community that You've surrounded us in. Help us to get better, help us to get healthy, and then help us to go out and infect others with joy, love, kindness, and happiness. Lord, help us to go and infect this community with the good news that God loves us. Amen. And that He loves them too. Lord, help us not to isolate and take this infection just to ourselves and then have it die here, but help us to go out and infect the community with this good news, this news of new life through Jesus our Lord.